Sua Eccellenza l'Ambasciatore degli Stati Uniti d'America in Italia, John Phillips. Accomodiamoci, prego. Segue ora il saluto del magnifico rettore, il professor Massimo Carpinelli.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm so pleased to be with you today and to have the chance to introduce our guest speaker, the Honorable John Phillips, Ambassador of the United States of America in Italy. On behalf of all professors, students, and staff of the University of Sassari, let me welcome you to Sardinia. Ambassador Phillips is in his first official visit to Sardinia for a discussion on an exceptional topic subject, the US presidential elections. The spotlight of the world media is pointed directly at them. Ambassador Phillips was appointed by President Obama in 2015 and has since shown exceptional dedication to the relationship between the United States and our country. Being as an alumnus of the University of Notre Dame and Berkeley Law School, Ambassador Phillips started and directed the Center for Law in the Public Interest in Los Angeles for 17 years. During that time, the center was a major force in the field of environmental and civil rights cases, consumer protection, and corporate fraud and accountability cases. Moreover, Ambassador Phillips played a significant role in the creation of the U.S. government whistleblower reward program, designed to encourage private citizens to expose and stop any kind of fraud against the government. On a different note, Ambassador Phillips has a long-standing and deep knowledge of Italy. He knows how in Italy even small reality may conceal a great past and a bursting vitality. And we are confident that he will extend his appreciation on Italy's great diversity and beauty, also to our university, our city, and our region. For the University of Sassari, this event has a tremendous value, both an educational and a symbolic one. On an educational level, scholars and students will have the opportunity to understand a complex political process like the US presidential primary election and general election, thanks to the ambassador's expert point of view. On a symbolic level, for many scholars and students of this university, this meeting is an encouragement to pursue collaboration with the United States and US diplomatic mission to Italy. Our researchers and professors are engaged in comparative studies and the evolution of US politics, economics, culture, and society. There is a great number of ongoing collaboration with United States scholars in different hard science fields. Since 2006, the year when the visiting professor program was launched, we have hosted 58 scholars coming from the US. In the last 3 years, 29 study grants were funded to support mobility to the United States as a part of a program developed by the University of Sassari to promote non-EU study exchange. Over the years, the University of Sassari has collaborated with the US Embassy for the organization of meetings with experts to talk about US election, meetings involving esteemed scholars, working overseas, information session on the prestigious Fulbright academic exchange program. Before giving the floor to the ambassador, I wish to thank all the authorities attending this meeting and the colleagues and students who have shown their interest in participating in this conference. In particular, I thank the colleague of the Department of Political Science who organized this meeting. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming the Honorable Ambassador of the United States, John Phillips.
Thank you, Rector. Thank you for your introduction, and I'm very pleased to be here at your fine university and visit Sardinia. As the Rector said, this is my first trip here. I've been to Italy many times over the years, but I've never had the opportunity. I've always wanted to come to Sardinia, so this gives me 4 days to travel around and get to know the people here. Before I begin, let me make it elections in the United States, I want to make sure I clearly identify myself. I'm a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I was appointed by President Obama, who's a personal friend. And whatever I say here, you have to understand that I have a long history of being a Democrat and active in democratic politics. My wife is a journalist, was a journalist. She covered every presidential campaign in one way or another since 1976. So together we're very experienced or very knowledgeable about presidential campaigns. But before I begin to talk about that campaign, let me just give you a little bit of history about America. I'm sure many of you know this already. Our Constitution in 1787 was drafted after the Revolutionary War. It has served as a model for the world. It was drafted by an extraordinary group of people at that time. I don't think we've had assembled in America a group quite as good since, from Jefferson and Washington and Hamilton, and I've read much of that history. The concept of the United States of America has really took a long time to take root. I mention that because of the European Union and the discussions here about whether this should be a United States of Europe. It took decades for the Constitution itself to be both interpreted and accepted by the states. Questions like, should there be a federal bank? Should they be able to loan money? Should they maintain a standing army? What is the power of the federal government versus the power of individual states? Most people thought of government as being just in their neighborhood, 40 kilometers away, and they didn't think so much of a real powerful federal government. But that's what became over time. And during that period, two parties emerged. We have a two-party system in America. Italy's a little bit different, as many other European countries are. We had the Federalists, meaning they're all for a powerful government. Remember, these states all came together because of a Revolutionary War. They didn't necessarily want to combine with many other states, but they did out of necessity. They favor regulation. They favor being able to make decisions for the states. This was called Federalists, and that was the Hamilton group. Then there was the Jefferson group called Anti-Federalists. They wanted power to devolve to the states. And that's been the debate, really, over the years, and it continues to today. The Republicans and the Democrats really are those two parties. Republicans are in favor of less government. Their emphasis is on free markets and less regulation. More emphasis on the responsibility of the individual to take care of himself or herself. The Democrats want a strong and active federal government. Taking care of the less privileged. Income inequality is something they've always paid attention to. So this has been the tension of those two parties, and that's, in summary, what the positions are today of the Democrats and the Republicans. Now, there are two other factors that help shape America, made it somewhat unique. One is that America is a land of immigrants. It's interesting today to consider, given the immigration issues facing really the United States and the world. Everybody who came to America came from somewhere else. My grandparents are Italian immigrants. They came over in 1902, just like many, many others in Europe, seeking a better life and better opportunity. So that gives it sort of a unique character when you have everybody coming and leaving their homes behind, leaving everything behind, and going to a new country across a big ocean to start a new life. The other factor that really has shaped America in a bad way is slavery. Slavery was a scourge of slavery. It's unbelievable that we had slaves brought over against their will, many of them from Africa, to service the agrarian needs of the South and others. But because of that history, we pay a terrible price today. And there's an element of racism, a stain of racism in America that continues. And I think President Obama, as a black American, has has significant opposition, primarily because he is African American. People just won't accept maybe up to 20-25% of the American voters. So let me turn to the campaign and try to make some sense of it. I just say preliminarily that this year's campaign is like no other we've ever had or ever experienced. Everybody that I know reacts this way. If the Republicans nominate Donald Trump, which seems almost certain, and if the Democrats nominate Hillary Clinton, which also seems certain, polls at this stage suggest and show that these two candidates are more unpopular with the public than any previous races we've had in the last half century. The polling on Hillary, whom I know and have known, I think she's very good. But it's negative because she's been around too long, 24 years on the stage, and this is what the polling and the focus groups show, and they want somebody new and somebody different, and they're irritated by her manner and her style. These things matter, but they think she's very smart, and they think she's very experienced. And I think she'd be a good president. I think she's not been a great candidate, but I think she'd be a good president. Mr. Trump has no experience in government whatsoever. He has made statements that many of you have seen, racist, xenophobic statements. He appeals to anger for America and for many Americans, and for me, his rise in this election year across the world has been an embarrassment. I've had the questions posed to me every day, just like all ambassadors do. What's happening to America? And you've all seen the kind of statements that he's made. What do they like about him? What is the public, the ones that are voting for him? They like that he's not in government. The anti-government movement experience today is reached a real peak. I don't think it's really justified in terms of where the country is. He's a businessman, and he's a rich businessman, so they think he must be successful. He's very blunt. He tells it like it is. That's what they say. And he empowers them to say things that they otherwise wouldn't say that could be considered racist. There have been some violence at his rallies because he ramps up the anger level. I think most people that I know would be very, very worried with the prospect of a President Trump. But remember this is only a primary election. Primary means you select from each party who should be the nominee. The Republican Party makes up around 38-39% of the electorate, and he has about 40% of that support. So that's something in around 16 or 18%. But it's been a very highly visible campaign, and it's been very lucrative for all the stations that have been running the debates. They've had tremendous turnout and interest, which generates profits. So it's much more pervasive, this campaign, than normal. He appeals to lower educated and underemployed people who are angry. Those who blame immigration and trade relationships as on their plight. Those who don't think that their lives will get a lot better. He appeals to that anger. Many are angry at government officials, their inability to get anything done, their threat to shut down the government, the paralysis that it has engendered, the default threat on our debt, the language that they use, and the rise of the Tea Party, which is a group that just says shut everything down, don't cooperate, no compromises. Now, things will change going forward. There's a long way to go. We haven't even gotten to the conventions. And the four important events that will make a difference, and could make a difference, is the selection of a running mate, which will be done between now and July. It's the convention itself. Even though the convention will be determined before it opens and begins, it will be perceived as an effective convention or ineffective one. How is their message being projected to all the voters, because they do get a lot of people watching? It will be the 3 debates that they have every year between the 2 presidential candidates. And it will also be how popular is the incumbent party's president, in this case, Mr. Obama. Well, his popularity is going up, and if you look at his legacy, it's very strong. And I think during the course of the campaign, it's going to become apparent that he's had a very successful presidency and that the country is on the right track. Unemployment, he took over, it was a financial disaster, as we all recall, in 2008, 2009. Unemployment ramped up over 10%. Growth was absolutely stopped, going negative. Many millions of jobs were lost. So what's happened over 8 years? Well, the unemployment has gone from 10% to 5%, cut in half. The GDP growth is growing and is roughly twice what Europe's is. Very strong job creation. We're creating something like 2.5 to 3 million jobs a year, something like 14 to 15 million jobs created so far. We now have rising wages as well and low inflation. He saved the auto industry. That was very unpopular for him to do. 65% of the people said, let the auto industry go. Don't take them out of bankruptcy. Well, we have a thriving automobile industry. Fiat Chrysler, with the help of Italy and Fiat joining forces, and General Motors. They've never sold more cars, and that would have meant 1 million jobs. But President Obama felt that was extraordinarily important. We had to save it despite the opposition, and now, of course, it turns out that was for certain the right thing to do. The stimulus package that he was able to get through, not as much as he liked. This is the same debate going on in Europe, stimulus versus austerity. Spent close to $1 trillion, $800+ billion, made a huge difference in getting all these jobs created. Healthcare. Healthcare is something that really does separate the parties. I mean, he put on a political risk of taking on health care, something that was very hard to do, and he was successful at doing that. So for today, we have more than 18 million people who have health care, who didn't have health care. It's still a controversial issue, but he did it. He cut the deficit by 2/3. We are now energy independent with the shale gas revolution. But why is it that he's not had the popularity that you would think he would deserve? When he was here not too long ago, and I said, Mr. President, your popularity here in Italy and all over Europe is over 80%. Your popularity in the United States is 42%. His reaction was, yeah, I know I could be president of Europe if it was available. But the reason why he was, and now his popularity, by the way, is going back up. It's 50-51, which is high. It's because the contrast of the other Republican candidates, especially when you had Mr. Trump and Ted Cruz, who was his main competitor. They see how effective President Obama has been, and they worry about who's going to succeed him. So that will be a big factor. If he has high popularity, if he's up to 55%, because typically in America, you don't have the same party in power for 8 years. It's usually hard to get another 4 years. People just want to change. So that's the risk. But if you're doing well, if you're on the right track for all the reasons that I identified here, then that's a big plus. The debate, all the things I mentioned, will play out. There have been lots of twists and turns with prior races, which have changed dramatically in the last 3 and 4 months, based on the debates, based on the conventions, as I mentioned. So I think right now Hillary Clinton is polling ahead, significantly ahead in some polls, less so in others. My personal belief is once they understand the issues and the characters, once they understand more about who Donald Trump is and his background, and if he continues making his same statements and outrageous comments without any support. They've done a survey to show that 75% of the facts that he represents are wrong. But right now, those people who are supporting him don't seem to be bothered by that. We'll see how. I can't predict what it's going to be like, but I know it's going to attract the attention of the world. The stakes are extremely high. These will be two very, very different presidents, and going forward, I think the people will understand that, and I have confidence in our democracy. Also, Mr. Trump, and the polling I didn't mention before, about 70% of the people have said they under no circumstances would vote for him. That's pretty high. So I'm confident in the end of the day that our democracy will work, and come November, Hillary Clinton will be elected, but it's going to be a bumpy ride, a very bumpy ride. So thank you. Any questions?